looking at the signs of the zodiac. And before we get to that, you can check out this series of shows as well as many other shows that I've done over the last 14 years, going into our 15th year now, on YouTube. And you can go timeoutyoutube.com, and that will get you to where all the videos are. There's right now well over 800 videos that I have up online with this show, several other shows that air here locally on Channel 23. Continuing with us for this part of our look at the zodiac, we're looking at Capricorn this week, and we are with Jonathan Gray, who is a biblical archaeologist, and you are all the way out in New Zealand, and you're, for me, tomorrow, and for you, I'm in yesterday, and I think it's, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon there on Saturday as we tape this. So, Jonathan, welcome once again to the program, and tell people a little bit about yourself, and we'll get right into this current sign that we're looking at.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I've been an archaeologist. I've been in the field of archaeology now for over 40 years, on all continents, and I've been lecturing, writing, and exploring for all that time. One of the most exciting subjects of all is, of course, the ancient zodiac, the archaeological evidence for star signs having been universally understood and carrying a meaning which is parallel to the story of the Bible. Very, very interesting study. Mm-hmm. In the last few episodes, we've been looking at the first four of the star signs, which are Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius.
Right.
And the theme of these has been the promised deliverer, the promised one. His person, his work, and his eventual triumph over the enemy. How he was the seed that was born to be bruised, the seed of the virgin, how he would be the price paid, and that was pictured, of course, by the scales, and how he would endure a struggle, fight with Scorpio and the serpent, and his eventual victory made certain. And there we have Lyra the harp and the fires of punishment upon the enemy. That is the summing up of the first four star signs, and I should mention that each star sign has three explanatory signs called decans, which are found on the star maps adjacent to the main star sign. Now, we come to a new section, and this is, we're not speaking so much, the emphasis is more now not on the promised deliverer, but on the rescued ones, who will be the fruit of the deliverer's work, their history, and their ultimate destiny. And the summing up of Capricorn really is virtually this, that the death of the coming one will make possible the life of those whom he is rescuing. So he dies so they can live.
Right.
That is the theme of Capricorn. And its three side pieces, Sagitta, Aquila, and Delphinus, that his death makes possible their life. So we'll get into that now, Kevin, and I think it should be interesting.
Yes, so please continue right along with what you're talking about.
Their death out of his, their life out of his death. Now, in astrology, Capricorn is simply seen as a goat, which has no meaning whatsoever. But Capricorn, as seen on the ancient star maps right through history and still existing today on the old star maps, is something much more expressive and conveys a very powerful message. Now, today it's called Capricorn, which is a Latin word, but even the elements of this Latin name, Capricornus, still retain the original meaning that was on the older maps with the other languages. Not only the meaning of the goat, but the meaning that this is associated with the atonement and the sinking in death or bowed in death. So what we've got here is a dying goat. Not just a goat, but a goat that is dying, experiencing death. Now, so here we have a fallen goat, but as we look along the body of the goat, it suddenly turns into the vigorous tail of a fish. So we've got something here which is half goat and half fish.
Right.
Now, the goat has always been known as a sacrificial animal. And so we've got here this goat, he's fallen down in the attitude of dying. Now, if we look at the star names that make up the stars of this constellation, or star sign, we find an interesting confirmation of this. The star Gedi means the cut off.
The cut off.
Found from a previous session that cut off simply means a violent death.
Huh.
A person being cut off, his life being cut off. Now, this is what one of the star names is for Capricorn. It's telling us that this goat has a violent death. It's a deliberate death, not something that he'd die of sickness or old age. It's a violent interruption to his life.
Hmm.
And the next star close by is Dabir, which means the sacrifice slain. So it amplifies that not only is he cut off, but he is a sacrifice that's being slain. Very, very interesting enlightenment on what this goat is all about.
Hmm. So please continue.
Our names signify the slaying, so he's going to be killed. He's going to be murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And another star, translated into English, its name means the sacrifice is coming. So here, clearly, we've got sacrificial death. And this is describing the way the goat dies. He dies as a sacrifice.
Hmm. So you have basically, I know from what I've read, the dying goat and the living fish. And it's and this sign, as you've said, this goes back thousands of years, and it's always been represented the same way as a half goat, half fish?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
We've got the body of the dying goat ending in the body, or terminating in the body and tail of a vigorous fish.
Hmm.
And this living fish takes its being, you might say, out of the dying goat, which it derives all its life and vigor.
Right. So you're looking at a good illustration of Christ and the church.
Exactly.
Exactly. Now, what about the...
If we look at the Coptic name for this sign, the Coptic name for Capricorn is bearing. In English, it means the act of bearing, the act of bringing forth or procreation. So the dying goat makes possible the bringing forth of life for the fish.
Now, how about if we get into those deacons or those other stars that are around it, those other signs that are around this sign? Because just to reiterate, there's actually not 12 star signs. There's actually 48. You want to get into that very quickly once again as a way of reviewing, and then let's get into these other deacons?
Yeah, sure. Well, yes, every one of the 12 signs, I mean, astrology only recognises 12 signs, and they don't even know what those signs mean. They use them for fortune telling,
Right.
in a nutshell, and they have no idea of their sacred origin and their meaning. But the 12 signs of the zodiac actually is a path in the sky surrounding our Earth, which is about 16 degrees wide, through which the sun passes in the course of a year, appears to pass. Actually, we're encircling the sun, but the sun appears to be passing through the sky because each month it's in a different part of the sky as seen from the Earth, and that's because of our movement against the sky background. Now, every month, 4 signs actually appear, not just one. There is the main sign, and there are 3 other signs close to it which explain more detail what that sign is all about. And so in the course of 12 months, we have 3 accompanying a main one. That's 4 at a time. Multiplied by 12 months is 48 signs in the pathway of the sun through the sky in the course of a year.
Right. And so...
Now,
Go ahead.
get into the decans. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead. I was going to say continue.
Oh, right. Now, it's interesting that the pagans later on perverted this. Satan always counterfeits. He always likes to spoil beautiful truths. And that's why astrology came about. Because this was telling the future of the world and the deliverance of mankind by the Messiah, along came astrology to change the future meaning of it into personal fortune telling, which is a terrific perversion of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, we have in the ancient world, when people forgot God, they began to make up other gods for themselves, and we find the Philistines had a half-fish god called Dagon.
Right.
Which was only an imitation of what was on the star signs. It was not something they invented. It was just a perversion of something that was known worldwide, the half-goat, half-fish. And so this half-fish god, Dagon, it's interesting that in the Philistine language, its name means fruitfulness, the seed producing, which actually does incorporate the original truth.
Huh. Ironic.
And likewise does the Horus of the Egyptian mythology and the Oannes, half-fish, of the Babylonian fable. It's interesting that all of these are derived from the original true sign, but they're perversions of it.
Right, right. Now, let me just stop you for 1 second before we get into those deacons again, and that is, how does this section, these 4 that we're just beginning to look at, really differ from the first 4 that we just got through looking at? Because they really seem to be, in a set, in a group.
Yes, the difference between the first 4 signs and these next 4, starting with Capricorn, is very interesting. When we put these on a chart, they look like a lattice work in which north and south are linked together and east and west are cross-linked together. The whole thing is a wonderful pattern. It shows a tremendously complex mind. If we go, for example, now along the first group, it's all about the promised deliverer, the seed born to be bruised, the price he will pay, the struggle, and the eventual victory. Mm-hmm. Now, if we go to the rescued ones, which are the fruit of his work, his death makes possible their life, a flow of blessings is bestowed, and blessings are enjoyed under suffering, and his people are finally released. And that's going from left to right.
Wow.
If you go from top to bottom, from the first 4, the first one of the first 4 is Virgo, the seed born to be bruised. The first one of the next 4 is Capricorn. His death makes possible their life. Then we go back to the first 4, the second one of that, Libra, the price that he will pay, and now we come to the rescued ones. The second one is the flow of blessings bestowed by that price.
Wow.
And then we go to back to the first 4. The third one of those is Scorpio, the struggle, and then the third one of this next section on the rescued ones is Pisces. It's not struggle, but it's very parallel, the blessings enjoyed under suffering.
Right.
And then if we go back to the first group, the last one of the first 4, eventual victory made certain, that's Sagittarius. We go now to the last one of this next group, relating to the rescued ones, his people are released. So we've got a parallel. If we had time to go do those for the chart, you would see that whether you go left or right or up or down, they are linked. They're linked by chain after chain, one chain upon another chain, crossing each other. Very wonderful planning on the zodiac star signs on the maps.
It's very, very amazing, and you don't see that in the counterfeit of that in astrology, do you?
Oh, the counterfeit is totally anemic and empty.
Huh.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the deacons that we have for Capricorn, and let's start with the first star, and we'll move along in through the group, please.
All right. Just before we do that, Kevin, if you don't mind, I would like to draw a parallel between the star signs and the biblical explanation. Absolutely.
Please do.
Right. Now, in the Bible, the goat was traditionally a sacrificial animal for a sin offering. Leviticus, the book of Leviticus, chapter 9 and 10, tells us, using the word sin offering, which is identical to one of the names of the stars on the star map. It represented the coming one, the Messiah, the seed, which must, according to the Gospel of John, chapter 12:24, and I'm quoting, must die in order to bring forth much fruit. That's like it's saying, he must die that others must live. And out of his death, every rescued person grows with growth that is from God. That's in Colossians chapter 2. Now, we're talking about the fish deriving its life, its growth from the dying goat. Just as the New Testament says, out of his death, everyone will grow with growth that's from God. Very interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Likewise, the fish is a well-understood sacred symbol in the Bible. God's people in both the Old Testament in Jeremiah and in the New Testament are depicted as fish. And when Jesus called his 12 disciples, he said, I will make you fishers of men. You're going to catch fish, but they will be men. So we're likened to fishers if we hear the gospel and follow it. And it's interesting that in the Gospel of John also, Jesus speaks of his rescued ones as being born of water. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So here they are repeatedly called also his body. We're called members of his body and of his flesh and his bones in the New Testament, both in Ephesians and Corinthians. So just as the fish are part of the goat's body. So it's the same message we see. We've got the physical death of one, and that brings life, the spiritual life of the others. So Jesus physically died for us, and those who follow him spiritually die to the old life, and through his power walk in newness of life, freed from sin. And it's so perfect, the analogy between the star maps and the Bible. They do bear the fingerprint of the same divine origin, no question about it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So do you want to get into the deacons now?
Yes, now let's go into the deacons. We've got Sagitta, the arrow of divine justice. This is an arrow. It's not an arrow that's still in the bow. It's an arrow that has left the bow,
right,
already been shot, and it's ready. It's speeding to its aim. And the execution it performs is it's facing the goat on the old star maps. It's heading toward the goat. It's going to kill him. So we've got the arrow of divine justice upon evil, which pierces through the one who has agreed to bear that evil and answer for all our sins. So the arrow comes and pierces him. And it's interesting that in the book of Psalms, the very arrows of God stick fast in the body of the coming sufferer,
right,
prophecies, who has fallen, who has taken upon himself to fall down for our guilt. That's in Psalm 38. And in Isaiah, the wonderful messianic prophecy, one of my favourite chapters it's come to be, Isaiah 53, it says he was stricken by God, smitten by him. Now, that's interesting because we've got God the Father striking his own Son,
right,
that he has given for the sins of the world, and he is pierced for our transgressions. He's pierced by the arrow of divine justice against sin. He takes that punishment.
And it's really, to me, always so fascinating to see that this stuff was written in the stars 6,000-something years ago, and there it is. And it's just amazing.
There it is.
There it is, right there.
Absolutely overwhelming. All details, every detail was in the star maps there, long before the Bible was ever written. And then, of course, the holy prophets wrote down what God told them, because he said to Abraham, look up in the stars, and he was preached the gospel in the stars, and then he gave it to his prophets in the Bible. So the Bible and the star maps are telling the very same story.
It's really incredible, and sometimes you need an entire book of the Bible to tell what, this one constellation or just some of these star groupings are actually saying.
Yes, that's right.
It's really amazing.
There is Sagitta, the arrow of divine justice, aimed at the dying goat, coming from the Father to his Son, and it would seem even to the Son on the cross as he hung on the cross that day for our sins, that it was the divine favour being withdrawn from him. I mean, when you consider that they had enjoyed a very close, unified communion throughout eternity,
right?
And Jesus spoke of his Father's great love to all the people while he was on earth. How tremendous they were, how his Father and he were one. Yet now, as he takes upon himself the sins of the world, he feels the divine justice against sin, and he takes it upon his shoulders and suffers for it on our behalf. So that on the cross it seems that as the darkness prevails, he is deserted. It seems that he is abandoned. He goes through the experience that every sinner will feel who rejects salvation, that feeling of eternal separation from their Maker.
And here's a good chance to pick up on Aquila, the other deacon, where it says he is pierced in falling.
Yeah. So we come to Aquila. Now here we've got an eagle. The eagle is pierced, he's wounded, he's falling, and the chief star in Aquila is a star which has the Arabic name of Al-Tair, which means the wounded. So here we've got the same the same event happening to this eagle. So the eagle now becomes the counterpart of the dying goat. We know that God himself has given us many symbols of his character and his existence, and each symbol has a meaning of its own which helps us understand another aspect of him. And other star names translated into English mean covered with blood, the scarlet-coloured one, the torn, the piercing, the wounded in the heel. So there we've got the wounded in the heel again, which takes us right back to the same Messiah that's depicted in the first four star signs, and this identifies him as the same person. The same story is going on under different symbols, but the star names help us to identify him as the same being, the same person, right through all
now,
the
is this the
different
same
pictures.
eagle that I've read in your book where it talks about where the eagle will actually make itself bleed if it doesn't have food to feed its young, and will actually like cut itself up to feed its young?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And isn't it interesting that Jesus himself said, "No man takes my life, I give it myself." In other words, he sheds his own blood for us.
Yes. You want to elaborate more on that, because I found that section of what you wrote about right there to be really fascinating, and something I didn't know about the bird. I mean, it's really fascinating that an eagle would do that.
It is absolutely marvelous. It loves its young so much. It's so tender toward its young that if it's got nothing else to give them, it will tear into itself so they can have its blood. Its blood will save them.
Yes, and I know also, I think it's in the book of Psalms where it talks about our youth is renewed like the eagles. There's a type of eagle out in that section of the world that'll go to a very high level in the air and shoot straight down into the water and literally rip all of its feathers off. And then it can't fly for a while, of course, because it has no feathers. And then when the feathers grow back in, it looks like it's a young bird, even though it may be much older than that. And so it says our strength is renewed like the eagles.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
It's really incredible.
Yeah, sure is. I'd just like to mention something else about the eagle in the scripture too.
Please
in
do.
the book of Exodus, when the Israelites were led out of Egypt, God said he would lead them out on eagle's wings. He would bear them up. He'd give them the energy and endurance so they could quickly get to a place of safety.
Right.
And then in Deuteronomy, it's repeated. Deuteronomy chapter 32. It's a very interesting verse. It says, when the Most High, this is in 32 verses 8 and 9, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. Oh, wait a minute. 32:11. I'm sorry, go back. Speaking of the Most High God anyway. Verse 11 and 12. As the eagle stirs up her nest and flutters over her young, spreading abroad her wings, and takes them, bearing them on her wings, so the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. Speaking of God leading his people, the people of Israel, out to safety and salvation.
Fantastic. In the
They
4 minutes,
recognized him as their Redeemer, and that was prophetic, of course, what would happen later.
we have about 4 minutes
Got
left.
the wonderful love and care of the eagle for its young.
Yes, we have about 4 minutes left, so let's get into that last sign before we get off the air.
Okay, just one final thing. It'll take me 5 seconds.
Go right
The
ahead.
eagle is the natural enemy of the serpent, and that again puts the parallel right into focus.
It's obvious then.
So now we come to Delphinus, the third decan, and this star sign has the theme of the dead one rising again, and this is under the symbol of a dolphin. Now, the dolphin sign is very appropriate because a dolphin is a sea creature which rises up and leaps out of the water. And that's a peculiar characteristic of it, its ability to rise up and leap and spring out of the sea. Now, this is associated now with the dying goat and the eagle, because these are all together as four star signs explaining each other. And it conveys the idea of springing up again out of death. A resurrection to a new life or another style. And this, of course, agrees with the Bible, that we put the old life behind us when we accept our Saviour's way, and we live in a newness of life. And we're dead to the old ways of living, so that the things we used to love, we hate. The things we used to hate, we love. We've got a new kind of life. Our attitude has changed. And the star names in the sign include Delaph, which means coming quickly, Kal, which means the longed for, and also the multitude of fish. It's all part of the same picture.
Okay.
And I should say this, that these star signs did not appear by some accident or chance in the way they are on the sky maps. The goatfish, who's dying in his head but living in his body, and falling as an eagle pierced by the arrow of death, and springing up from the dark waves, reminds me of the prophecy of Jesus in Psalm 42:7, where it says, "All your waves and breakers have swept over me."
Yeah.
But the dolphin rises above that and jumps out, and this speaks of resurrection. So there is the beautiful symbolism all wrapped up in one final thought, that at the end of all this death, there's resurrection, both for the Messiah and for those he has rescued.
Yes, and there is life. Got about a minute left. A very quick comment before we get off the air, maybe for about 30 seconds.
Yes, certainly. This theme is, of course, coming in now about the rescued ones, the fruits of the deliverer's work. We're dead, we have hope of life. Now, without this kind of hope, people are committing suicide. There's more suicide among the youth today than ever before, and this is because, I believe, of the godless training they're getting, that God doesn't mean anything to them and there's no hope. With Jesus, there's all hope. There's plenty to live for.
Well, thank you so much once again, Jonathan, for joining us here on the program this week. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And very quickly, the sign we'll be looking at next time we're here is?
Will be Aquarius, very beautiful sign.
Very beautiful sign. And with that, for Jonathan Graham, of course, Kevin Gallagher, please tune in again next week to see what it is we'll be talking about. Until then.